Hey everybody, this is Russ from Metro Game Core. I finally got my hands on the most recent version of the MCON controller. This is a mobile-friendly controller that has some pretty cool tricks up its sleeve. And the idea behind this is very simple. It is a slide-up controller for your phone. It'll work on Android and iOS, and it connects via MagSafe. So you connect it like that, press the button on the top, and everything slides up to reveal these controls underneath. And so the idea is that this is a sleek and pocketable complement to your phone in case you have any emergency gaming that you gotta do on the go. It's got a couple other neat tricks too, including these fold-out flaps, which make it a much more ergonomic experience and not so top-heavy. You can also just pull off the top compartment with a little kickstand on the back in case you want to play separately. Now, this is not a mass production unit just yet, they're still a couple months away, but it is a big improvement over the prototypes that I've tested before, and I still got some of those here at the studio, so we'll do a comparison in this video as well. But suffice to say, if you're one of the many thousands of backers of this controller, I think you're going to be really happy with this product when it finally releases. So grab a snack and drink, let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. About a year and a half ago, I saw a Reddit post for someone named Josh King who was working on this product called MCON, and he was just making a 3D printed thing out of his dorm room, basically trying to create a controller to allow him to play Minecraft a little bit better on his phone. And I loved the idea, so I contacted him and I said, hey man, send me over one of these prototypes and I'll do a video about it and see if we can get some interest. And so this right here is the first box that he sent over to me last year, and this thing is kind of rough. You know, it was a 3D printed controller. He basically just cannibalized a different controller, then put it in this shell just to kind of show off the idea. So the way that this original prototype worked is you would slide it up and then it had the controls underneath. And again, they just kind of pulled this from a different controller, put all the parts inside of it, and then connected it this way. But even then, you can see that this controller had the makings of what Josh was going for. You could even pull this part out. It's got a little kickstand on it and everything. So all those ideas were already here at the beginning. And so yeah, I made a video about it, just kind of talking about the idea that, you know, these other bigger companies are not making a controller like this, but somebody can make it on their own, and it's still a very compelling idea. So after releasing that video, a couple companies got a hold of Josh and said, hey man, we can help you kind of make this a reality, and use their production skills to kind of put it all together. And so flash forward a few months later, and Josh has partnered with a company called Snap who makes phone-style accessories, and they had started making the MCON. And this is kind of like an early version right here. I had tested this one out in January at CES as well. And this one refined the look quite a bit. Instead of just forcefully sliding up the thing, they added these two buttons that you would push and it would pop it up. And then they had some rudimentary controls underneath. And this one's kind of a hybrid of what we ended up with here today. This one lost the kickstand functionality, which thankfully made it in the final model, but it also added these flaps at the bottom to allow you to have a little bit more ergonomics as you're holding it. And so even though this one is also still very prototypey, you can kind of see the dream coming together in having this really nice kind of slider, pocketable controller. Once they had that partnership established, they launched their Kickstarter campaign showing off what this controller could be, and it kind of took the handheld world by storm. There were over 16,000 backers, and they raised $1.7 million. And then finally, flash forward to today, we've got a mock-up of the retail packaging here, and so everything is starting to come together. Now, I've had this for about a week at this point, and like I said, it's not the mass production unit, but it is very, very close. And inside the box, I think they've nailed it. They've got this big M right here to really remind you what you bought, and then underneath, you've got the controller itself, some packaging and quick start stuff, and then of course a tutorial that you can scan with a QR code. Underneath that, we've got a quick start guide, a safety manual, and then also a USB-C charging cable. It also came with a sticky magnetic ring that you can use with the controller in case you have a phone that doesn't have MagSafe, like an Android phone. So like here with my Android phone, I've connected it to the back of my case. And so here we are with the third major revision of the MCON here today, and I think you can kind of see that evolution where that 3D printed kind of janky mess that had a lot of great ideas to something a bit more refined and polished to finally that final product, which really looks like something that could go on a store shelf. Now, as far as buying one, I think it's only sold on their website right now. It's $150, but they have a pre-order price right now until it actually ships. So I think it's like $5 less, so $145. And it comes in two different colors, both black and white. They've also got a bunch of accessories lined up for it as well, including a dock, which is kind of interesting. So the dock will not only connect your controller to charge it if you want, but you could also use it to connect to your phone and then have that outputted via HDMI to your TV as well. So it's kind of a 2-in-1 dock. Another unique accessory is the keycast, and it took me a while to figure out what this is, but essentially it's a keychain that also functions as a USB-C to HDMI adapter. So the idea is that you could plug this into your phone, then use a cable to plug this into your TV without having to get something like a dock. So let's take a closer look at the MCON, starting with the front. So this is your MagSafe adapter right here. You can see it is slightly elevated. That's to make space for your camera bump on the side right here. But yes, it should connect magnetically to your phone. It also will slide back and forth. So depending on the size of your phone, you can kind of shift it a little bit just to give it a more centered appearance depending on the phone that you're using. The magnet is pretty strong, it just connects pretty nicely like that. It's not going to fall off or anything, but it is worth noting that my case right here has a second MagSafe adapter to it. So it's not connecting to the phone's MagSafe on my iPhone here, but rather the one that's on the case. My recommendation would be, if you are concerned about your phone falling off, is to get a case like this that has its own MagSafe built into it. Now, like I mentioned, I took the ring that came in the box and I affixed it to the back of my Android case. So there is some plastic here, the case between the ring and then the connector itself. It still does connect and it's a pretty solid connection, but I'm able to get it off if I shake it enough. So it's not as strong as it is on my iPhone that has its own dedicated magnet. And the reason why I recommend getting a strong connection is because this thing pops up super fast and loud. Let me give you a listen. And so yes, this thing pops up super fast. It's also quite loud, but that's also half the fun as well, because it is like a really fun and satisfying way to pop it open. And with a strong connection like on my iPhone, I've got no problems whatsoever. It pops on really nicely, it stays in put, and it's actually not quite as loud when you have the phone attached to it as well. So a very satisfying experience all around. But with the Red Magic phone, it's not quite the same experience because I've got that plastic in between the ring here, and so it's not a super strong connection, plus this phone is bigger. And so I can actually pop this out, make the phone fall out if I want. Now, it's not something that would actually happen if I was to set this up with my Android phone. I would just pop it open and kind of hold it like that, and then I can go and start playing my games. But it is something worth noting that if you've got a big and heavy phone and not a very super strong connection, there is some concern there that you can pop your phone right off. So in the end, having this MagSafe technology does really rely on the connection with your phone and how strong that magnet is too. And I would recommend just going on the safe side and getting a case that will fit something like this easily. As far as the rest of the front, this is actually a metal plate on the top here, and so it actually feels really nice and cool to the touch. And yeah, it just feels really nice and sturdy altogether. Let's take a look at the top next. So we'll talk about the shoulders and triggers in a moment when we talk about controls and ergonomics. Let's talk about the power button. So there's a slider that will go off and on, but you can just kind of leave it on. It'll just be in a low power standby, and then when you pop it open, it'll actually turn on. And so you're able to turn it on and off by opening and closing the lid. And according to their spec sheet, the battery life on this will last 1.8 years in low power mode. So I think that having it like this is just fine. So personally, I haven't been switching it off, but it is something you could do if you wanted to. By the way, the battery in this is 500 milliamp hours. It's supposed to give you about 9 hours of total continuous gameplay time, and it takes about 2 hours to charge from start to finish. Also up top, we've got this Chrome button, and that's what's going to pop up the top like that. To the right of that, we've got our Bluetooth pairing button, and this can do multiple different things. For example, you can press any of these hotkeys plus the pairing button at the same time, and that'll change the type of input. By default, it's going to be the X plus pairing button, which is X input mode or Xbox mode. You can use the Y plus pairing button to change it to Nintendo Switch mode, so this will work on a Nintendo Switch. You can also press and hold the capture button plus A at the same time to swap out the ABXY pattern. The B button will pair into a DualShock mode, so this is going to be like a PlayStation 4 controller. You can also do the same with A in the pairing button. That's going to be D input or legacy Android. So you've got a bunch of different connection options depending on what you're connecting it to. For the most part, I think with a phone, you'll want to use the X one, but it is nice to be able to pair it with a Nintendo Switch, or you could use gyro on a Steam Deck with the PlayStation 4 setup, and so on. Now, the cool thing about this controller is that it can connect to 3 different profiles. So you can have it connected to 3 different devices at once, and you can toggle between them by double tapping on this button. So right now I'm in Android mode. You can see here that it's just connecting just fine via X input. But if I double click on this, it's going to cycle to the next profile, which I have set up for my iPhone. And so it'll take a moment to connect, but you'll see a little gamepad showing up right here, which means that it is connected to my iPhone. And so there we go right there. It just popped up. There's my little controller. And so now now I have the controller connected to my iPhone as my next profile. If I double tap on it again, I don't have a third profile set up, and so it'll blink 3 times quickly. And so that basically tells me that it's in pairing mode for my third cycle option. I just don't have anything paired right now. Okay, let's take a look at the back here. We've got the MCON logo and then snap, and you can see that we've got some exposed screws right here. Now, this was done intentionally because they want people to be able to go in and tinker with this if they would like. And I do like that overall ethos, and that instead of hiding the screws and making it look prettier, they just put it front and center and like, hey, you want to take this thing apart? Go ahead. Now, also on the back, we've got these flip paddles right here. I'm not really sure what they call them, but yeah, you can basically flip them out. They're pretty stiff, so it's not something that'll come out accidentally, and this is supposed to improve your overall ergonomics. We're going to talk more about ergonomics later, but in general, I would say that this is kind of a stopgap, if anything, and that's just one of the things about a controller like this is it's going to be inherently a compromise in many ways in order to get this sleek form factor. So this is not going to transform it into an Xbox controller by having these flaps, but it is nice to have a little bit of leverage as you're holding it. The grips themselves have this nice kind of dotted texture to them that is not found on the rest of the controller. This is more like a matte plastic, but these have this nice bumpy texture to them, and I really enjoy that feel. On the bottom, we've got our USB-C port. This is for charging, but you can also connect this thing wired. It'll go up to 1000 hertz polling rate if you connect it like this. By the way, this is a Bluetooth controller, and it's 125 hertz for polling rate here, so not super fast. I would not use this for competitive gaming, but it is more aimed towards just gaming on the go. So now let's talk about controls. We'll start with the D-pad. So this is a dome switch D-pad, which means that it's kind of clicky, but very soft and quiet, and it doesn't have a lot of travel to it. Essentially, you just got to push down that much to push it down, but it is still very light to the touch. It feels good. It has a good amount of pivot to it. I'm able to hit any direction I want, and I get a soft clicked feedback anytime I go in any direction. In practical use, when playing Contra, I like to press down on the D-pad and rock it left and right, and this test will show me whether or not I get accidental diagonals. Now, it is pretty easy to hit a diagonal on this device, but the thing is, because it's a dome switch, I get that feedback every time I do, which means that for me, it's not really an accidental diagonal. Instead, I know exactly how much pressure I need to give to hit that, and it feels very good. Moving over to a precision platformer like Celeste, where I do want to hit a diagonal sometimes, but sometimes I don't, this feels excellent to me. I've got that force feedback every single time where I'm pressing the dome switch and I know exactly where I am on the D-pad. So yes, this feels very good to me. I would play any D-pad game like this. And then finally, when it comes to a Street Fighter style game, I'm not the best when it comes to dome switches on these style games, but it is very easy to hit the diagonal moves like, a Hadouken and Shoryuken. And so I would say that yes, this is completely Hadoukenable and Shoryukenable. It's not a conventional D-pad, but after a couple rounds, I was very used to it and I was knocking out enemies left and right. So in the end, I think this is probably the perfect style D-pad that they could put in a slide out controller where they don't have a lot of space because it doesn't require a lot of travel, but still has that nice feedback. It almost feels Nintendo-like in its quality. Next up, we have these analog sticks, and I really like them. They are rather small, but they have a nice grippiness to the overall cap, and they also have a wide range of motion and big divots on the sides, and so you never even get close to touching these sides as well. And so I think this actually feels pretty good. These sticks themselves are basically flush with the rest of the case, and that's to make it like perfect clearance with the top part right there. And so I think that's probably the best they could have done. I think it's engineered really well. These sticks themselves are TMR joysticks, and I think they were made in partnership with GameSir, and they feel great, like they're nice and smooth, just really kind of comfortable overall, all things considered. I do like the fact that they are well inset too, because it makes it kind of a natural place to hold them, as opposed to like down here or something, and so I think it's probably the optimal place to put them. As far as the input themselves, it feels very tight and precise. I'm able to move it in any direction I want. They are a circular input, but I still think they feel very good. Overall, I think these are probably the best sticks they could have come up with given the circumstances. The fact that they had to have them have low clearance, but also a good amount of motion to them, I think they're great. And in terms of just overall input, I think it feels good, both in a single analog and dual analog style gameplay. Now, in general, I think this is still a compromise compared to like a full-size controller, but we are also talking about something that's a lot more slim and portable. Okay, now let's talk about these face buttons. So these are also dome switch, but very light to the touch and again, low travel. They feel a lot like the D-pad, but in face button form, which I think is great. It just adds a lot of synergy between the two. And yeah, I think these feel very good. Just a little bit of responsive tactile feedback as you press down on them, and they are ultra quiet. And I think that's great. And then finally, we've got our menu buttons on each side. So this is select and start on the far edges. And then we have a capture button on the left and then our home button. And these will work, depending on the device device and the connection type you have. And then finally, we've got our eject button, which is a physical release for the kickstand. You can see there's these two little holes right here, and essentially they are just held in place by this, and then by pressing the eject button, it just releases them so you can pull this out. Once you have it removed, we've got this little kickstand right here. It just goes up to one little position like this. It clicks into place. And throughout my testing, I thought it was a pretty good angle for tabletop gaming. I think it'll work pretty well on like a table tray on an airplane as well. I think personally I would have liked to have it at a wider angle like this so I could play like this instead, but unfortunately it doesn't click there. It only clicks here and then all the way up, and I don't think that all the way up is a very good angle at all. It doesn't give you really anything. Instead, I would rather just keep it closed and then play it down like this. Now on the top as well as on the bottom, they've got these magnets and they connect to one another, and that's what holds it into place at that specific angle. And so I can actually push this together like this without having the kickstand hold it into place, and you can see that, yeah, it gets to that angle because of the magnets that are holding it there. And to put it back together, it's super simple. You just line up the kickstand, put it into place, and there we go, and you can close it right up. And so that's really about it when it comes to the overall design and controls. I think it is a pretty neat setup, and I love the fact that this thing kind of feels just like a secondary phone. And the way I'm thinking about it is that it's not something that I would keep attached to my phone and then carry everything around like this. To me, this is too thick. Instead, I'm thinking of them as two separate entities. So in one pocket, I would throw in my phone, and in the other pocket, if I wanted to, I would throw in the MCON, depending on whether or not I planned on playing games on the go. And in terms of weight and overall thickness, it's about the same as, yeah, a phone that has a case connected to it. In fact, when I showed this off to one of my nephews, the first thought that they had was that this was a battery bank. And I think that's a good analogy as well, because it's kind of similar to that overall size and utility as well. So if you are someone who puts a battery bank maybe in your purse or your bag, then this is going to be right at home. And of course, that's the main allure of the MCON, the fact that you could just kind of have this thing slipped into your pocket or your bag and then pull it out when you need it, and that's a lot less cumbersome than an actual telescopic controller. So now let's talk about the ergonomics of this controller in the two major forms that we have. So to start, we've got our standard setup like this with the controls underneath the phone, and it goes at a slight angle, and yeah, that's about it. And as you can imagine, with a setup like this, it is quite top heavy. We've got our phone and a case as well as that top plate that's got metal in it. All of this is at the front, and then you've got the controls underneath. And so what I found, the only way that I can hold this comfortably is by using my index fingers on the back like this to basically leverage the overall weight. And so the weight is kind of balanced like this on my index fingers, which are a little bit higher up. And I found that this is a pretty comfortable setup when playing D-pad centric games where I have my thumbs right here. Not so much when they are down below and I'm trying to use these shoulders and triggers with modern games, but more rather just, platformers and role-playing games like this, it's absolutely fine. And one of the reasons why I like this setup is because these flaps are up, which gives it a more kind of seamless grip right here. I've got a chunkier piece to hold on to. And so that in general is how I play these D-pad or old style games. And of course, this wouldn't just be limited to emulation. There are modern games like Sonic Mania that you can get on Android and iOS that will play just fine here on a modern phone, and it is also D-pad centric. I also think the layout is not half bad when it comes to playing with a single analog stick as well. For example, an old school arcade game, this all feels very comfortable too. And I think that if I just had a couple minutes to play a game, this is the kind of setup that I would use, where I would just pop on the phone, open it up, and then just start playing like that. It'll take a minute to connect, but then once you're done, you're ready. Now, if you wanted a longer gaming session, that's when I would recommend using these flaps right here, especially with other control schemes too, because this helps offset the heaviness of the top right here, because some of that leverage right here is being held by your bottom two fingers. And so this is how I hold it, where I've got my two fingers down below like this, and then I've got my index finger up top, and then my middle finger is just kind of in the center of the controller. By pulling down the flap, you do have a bit of a gap right here, and it doesn't feel quite as comfortable and as chunky as it does with the flap up. And so it's a bit of a compromise right there just to be able to have this as an option. But I think just in terms of long gameplay sessions, this is an ideal setup because it takes a little bit of that weight off of your index fingers and makes it more comfortable in the long term. And of course, there's a variety of different ways that you can enjoy a controller like this. You could use it for emulation, for example, here with PSP, but then also there are a ton of Android and iOS games that you could enjoy as well, like Vampire Survivors or the latest NBA 2K game on iOS, and then of course some classics like Dead Cells. All these are going to play just great, and it is nice to use those little flip-out paddles to just make it a more ergonomic experience overall. You could also use this as a game streaming setup if you would like, through NVIDIA GeForce Now or Xbox Cloud Streaming, or even remote play with your home console, a PlayStation or an Xbox. All that's going to work too. Now let's talk about the shoulder and trigger buttons as it relates to modern gaming. So the shoulder buttons themselves are a little bit skinny, but my index finger slides right into place right here, and so I am able to use them. They kind of have a soft click to them. They are basically silent as well, but easy to press down on. So I've got no real issues with the shoulders themselves, other than the fact that I think if you've got big chunky fingers, it might be a little bit cramped. Below that, we've got our trigger buttons. These are analog triggers. So if you want to use that for a driving game, yes, you're going to have a difference between 0, 10%, and 100%. You do have that leverage there. Now, the triggers themselves don't really move that much. They just kind of pivot in place. They just shift down like that in a little rotation. And so there's not a lot of room to work with there. And they just kind of slope down as well. They don't slope up like a lot of other triggers. So it doesn't have a lot of grip to it. Now, the buttons themselves do have that same kind of texture to them. So you can kind of feel that grippiness as you use it, but I do feel like my fingers are going to slide off of this a little bit more easily than, say, an Xbox controller. And so it is a bit of a limited analog experience in general, just because, it only goes down this far. It basically hits the bottom of the flap right here, and that's all the room they have to work with. And so I think they did the best with what they had, but in general, it's not going to be like a perfect experience. And so when it comes to playing a more modern setup where you've got both analog sticks and the triggers going, say, for example, a first-person shooter game, you've got some leverage here between the fact that you can kind of hold on to the bottom grips and then reach back to these triggers. And then also you have like an ideal placement for the analog sticks too. And so I think ergonomically it could have gone a lot worse, but I think it's pretty decent. And so when playing a game like Destiny Rising, my immediate reaction is that, man, this is probably not the best way that you can play this game. I would rather use a real controller or even a telescopic controller compared to this, but it is, again, one of those compromises that we have to live with just because this thing is so sleek and pocketable. And so I think this falls into the category of gets the job done, in the sense that if you're on the go and you don't have any other controller option, but you did have space for the MCON, then this would be an ideal setup compared to trying to use touchscreen controls. And that really is the heart of the MCON experience, in that it is form over function, but they tried to put as much function into that form as they could. One other thing worth noting in terms of ergonomics, if you have a larger phone, like the max version of an iPhone or one of these bigger Android phones, it gives you less space to reach for your shoulders and triggers because the phone kind of gets in the way as you reach up. And so as I kind of go up right here, I'm pressing on the bottom of the phone as it goes above. And so if you've got large fingers and a large phone, this might be a little bit cramped when hitting the shoulder button. Again, for me, it's not that big of a deal. I'm able to play games just fine, but it was a concern that I had because I am touching the phone as I'm playing. And so if you do have larger hands, for example, you used large or extra large size gloves, then this might be a problem. I wear medium-sized gloves and it's just fine for me, but I do recognize that for larger hands, it might be a little bit more cramped. And then, of course, one other option to consider is that you do not have to actually have your phone attached to the controller as you're using it. And so if you have the ability to use it either in kickstand mode or just really laying your phone directly on the table, then you can play like this no problem. And if you've got larger hands, this is a much more comfortable setup. One of my favorite platforming controllers is this one right here. It's called the 8-Bit Do Lite, and I love the fact that, it's just kind of small and compact, but it has the controls that I need. And it's got the same kind of dome switch connection as the other one as well, and so it feels very similar. Now, I would say this one's a bit more comfortable because the D-pad and the face buttons are higher up, and so this is just a more natural place for my thumbs, but I was surprised to find that the MCON is not that far off either, and so I kind of see this as replacing this controller as like my put in my pocket when I'm going to be going on an airplane kind of controller. And again, I think this kind of goes towards the overall design ethos of the MCON controller, in that it's not perfect in any situation, but it definitely gets the job done in many different use cases. And so it really becomes a jack of all trades controller where you can use it in multiple different modes with multiple different phones depending on your use case and the situation that you're in. And finally, one other thing worth noting, I just wanted to show off that yes, this thing has a Nintendo Switch mode and it works with Nintendo Switch. And all I did here is just paired it with Nintendo Switch mode and then held down the A and capture button to swap out the A, B, and X, Y. And it picked it up like a Switch Pro controller and it works absolutely fine. And it also has built-in gyro. Now, you're not really going to need gyro with a phone just because a phone usually has its own built-in gyro, but this is one of those use cases where the 6-axis gyro actually works out well. I'm not sure how many people are going to use this controller in place of the controls already on a Nintendo Switch, but it is nice to have the option too. So given what we've seen so far, I did put together some collected thoughts between what I like and what I don't like so far with this device. Now, this is not a mass production unit, but I think we are fairly close here. So even though I would not consider this to be a full-on review, it is pretty close. Let's start with what I like, and number one by far is just its pocketability and overall portability. That's exactly what it's going for. It is sleek and slim. You can throw it in your bag or in your pocket depending on where you're going and how you want to travel. And I think that yes, in all of those use cases, you've got a controller right then and there when you need it. It's about the same size and weight as a phone, and so if you don't mind carrying around a second device like that can help transform your phone into a gaming console, then this might be well worth it. It also doesn't hurt that it's got decent controls. Everything works well, all things considered. Good D-pad, good face buttons, the shoulders and triggers work pretty well too. It's also very versatile thanks to the fact that it's a Bluetooth controller. That means you can connect it to iOS and Android, no problem. And it's also got a bunch of different connection modes. By default, it'll be X input or Xbox mode, but you can also use it with a Nintendo Switch and in PlayStation 4 mode, and even D input mode if you want. I also really enjoyed the standby battery function that we have here. It turns off when you close the controller, it turns back on when you open it up, and the standby battery lasts, according to Snap, 1.8 years, which is kind of crazy. In general, the battery life for me has been pretty great. It's about 9 hours altogether of continuous gameplay. And then, of course, one of the coolest things about this is that we've been able to watch this in real time unfold as a dream made in a dorm room with a 3D printer to a reality that's going to be shipping to over 10,000 people. It's not often that we see something like this actually come to fruition, so I think it's worth celebrating anytime it does. Now, that being said, it's not a perfect experience, so there are a couple things I would like to bring up, and number one is the fact that this controller inherently is a compromise. Like I've showed throughout this video, there's nothing that's absolutely perfect about this experience. You can find better control options in basically every single space. But up until today, we have not seen a controller that will attach to your phone that also has all of these bells and whistles. And so even though it is a bit of a magical experience when you use the MCON controller, there are some compromises each and every step along the way. And then finally, this thing costs $150, and even though it does a lot of great things, that is still a lot of money to throw at a controller. When you compare it to something like the Backbone Pro, which actually is more expensive than the MCON, I can see why they went with that $150 price point. It was probably not cheap to put all of these good components inside. But if you are looking for the best bang for your buck, then I wouldn't say the MCON is the way to go. You can get something like the GameSir X5 Lite telescopic controller for about $30, $35 on Amazon. At the end of the day, it really comes down to what you're looking for with your portable gaming setup. If you're looking for something that gives you that phone-like experience where it's sleek and pocketable and it also pops out that you can play all the controls, then yes, the MCON is a really cool device. But if you don't mind carrying around something that's bigger and you do value the controls and ergonomics over anything, then I would say that you can save about $100 and get the X5 Lite. And when it comes down to it, I think that there is a market for each of these different considerations. If you're just going to be playing at home, then a telescopic controller is going to be great. But if you're looking for something on the go, then the MCON is really special. It's certainly not going to win any ergonomics awards, and it's definitely meant for more on-the-go gaming, and I think it does exactly what it set out to do. So long story short, based on what I've tested so far with this third model, I would say that if you already pre-ordered one, you're probably going to be very happy with how it turned out. For everybody else, if you saw all the features in this video and you think it's going to be a good fit for you, I am here to say that yes, this is a well-built product, but you really have to know what your needs are. For me personally, I see this as being my travel-friendly controller. I'm going to slide it into my backpack, and then, when there's a moment while I'm on travel, I can pull it out and then play on the go. Let me know what you think down below. Is there a market for a slide-out controller phone like this, or do you think that telescopic is the way to go? As always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we will see you next time. Happy gaming.